Maybe it only happens once every 5 years, but now they've established that the science can use terrestrial mechanisms to sync up with solar mechanisms. And this is really scary, because if you wanted to be nefarious with it and you start wiring down this science, every single storm is going to be a superstorm. Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David Dubine. And good afternoon, everyone. David Dubine here, Adapt 2030, Mini Ice Age Conversations. Wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet, welcome. Do you see the world changing in 2023? Remember, we can always start over. We have the skills that will allow us. But what are some of the events that we're going to have to deal with this year coming forward? Because if you know what you have to deal with, it's quite easy to then find a solution. Because if you already know we're going to be here, and we're here now, there's going to have to be some steps to arrive at the final destination. We're going to talk about a few of those today, with the crop losses happening in the Southern Hemisphere, which are now being masked by public geoengineering programs. Before it was conspiracy theory to say they were spraying things in the sky. Now Make Sunsets is coming out saying, we'll dim the sun and cool the sky for you. Got to pay us for it. We'll talk about that to disguise the crop losses when we come back. And welcome back. Thank you for spending your valuable time right here, Brighty on TV. David Dubine, Adapt 2030, Mini Ice Age Conversations. 2023, Have you noticed there's a vibration of fear in the air? See, I'm coming at this year as the biggest opportunity in human history, but I'm getting into these visualization exercises where, whatever mechanism out there, and I'm sure we can put labels on it. Everybody has a label for the purveyors of fear-based vibration interference pattern being put out in daily, however that arrives to your ears and eyes. But if you visualize yourself in a hot air balloon, and you can actually see that layer of fear, and you can feel yourself and see yourself rising in the hot air balloon out of that, above it, looking down on it, it resets you completely in the center. Really, it does. To jump out of that fear matrix into infinite possibility for 2023. Have you started to notice an increase in the appearance of wrinkles, fine lines, bags under your eyes, or other unusual signs of aging? It may be more than just stress from the new year. Wrinkles and other marks of aging are one of the top signs that your collagen levels are low. It becomes more vital every year that you get older to supplement collagen into your diet for the sake of your skin's health. As you've gotten older, for example, you may have found that your skin isn't as strong. Whether you're in your 20s or 90s, you can experience the healthy aging effects of collagen that it has on your skin with the help of this multi-collagen powder. I add it to my morning coffee or tea. It tastes great while keeping me a little more full between meals. I want you to try it and experience some of the same effects it's had on me. Grab a bag, 51% off on your order, plus receive several bonuses before the New Year's sale ends by going to healthwithadapt2030.com. That's healthwithadapt2030.com, and get ready to feel your best in the new year. Welcome 2023. And now on with the video. And that's the way we need to look at it. And this slide here, so apropos for 23. That tree was the former world that we used to know, 2019 and prior. I love that world. Travel, 3 months in Croatia, 2 months in Czech Republic, back to Taiwan, over in Asia, 2 months in Thailand, all working on the road. I loved it. Ancient history, I could go to any of the museums I wanted to. Great food, great people. And learn more about world history and look at the electric geology around the planet and do an enormous amount of research while I was on the road by living that lifestyle. But here we sit today, everything's still locked down. But think about that tree as the former world and something growing out of there. You can start over. We all can start over. It just takes the mind to do it. Now, speaking of that, I had, I don't know how closely you can see this here. Oh, there we go. Let me see if it comes in focus there. Whoops, there. Well, this is our gardening calendar. So I set today is the full moon, and it says, you know, what to do in the different times of the cycle of the moon, gardening with the moon. So as we look today, the 6th, it says cultivate only, and I'll read it to you directly if you couldn't see it on the screen. This day, if you're going to be planting seeds in the next 2 days, you're only going to end up with spindly growth. So save your time. Wait until the 9th and 10th. Those are the only 2 days that you can grow root crops, onions, carrots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, beets, and leeks on the 9th and 10th, which I think you could see that right there, the 9th and 10th. Then you're going to have to wait to circle all the way around until the energies come back into the rising vitality somewhere around the 21st. And this is called gardening with the moon. It's a moon calendar, and it moves. You can change it around, just depending. You need to set your days though. So I know that the full moon is today on the 6th, approximately halfway through. So I'll set it at midnight there. And we're going to have to use every possible option to us to be able to grow abundant food. Now, this is an old technique using the energy, lunar energies, to help you get a better crop yield. Now, on the inverse, if you want to prune something so you don't want it to grow back, you would follow the same, and it tells you when to prune to get the maximum amount of, when you prune, whatever's happening with the lunar energies and the soil moisture, it pulls away the light, vitality and life force out of the plant, and it just won't grow back. That way you can time your trimming, your pruning, your field work along with your planting based on the moon and the flow. If it can change the tides on our planet, it sure can affect your plants, both. So, you know, looking at natural cycles more into today's program, buffalo. Have you heard anything about it lately? No, me either. They wanted you to forget that so quickly. Yeah, they ran with the global warming narrative. I can't believe it again and again. Well, the record heat created the record snow. And I'm like, okay. You forgot about the water vapor and the Hunga Tonga eruption. Okay. But anyway, this is the depth of the blizzard. So again, preparedness and redundancy. You know, you look at some images like this, and what happens if you were in that car? Would you have enough materials in that car to survive for 3 days? Water, yeah, you could just get some of the snow, although it might be polluted, and you could melt it and you could drink it. But would you have enough clothing? Food, would you have enough snack bars or something? You're going to burn more calories when you're cold. And then how would you keep that car warm inside? Well, for me, I would bury the rest of the car just like you would with an igloo and completely cover it with snow. Because once you actually got that car warmed up with body heat of a couple people in there, it would stay. But if you're just going to be out in the open like that, that wind is going to be blowing by, taking all the heat through the windows. So it's super counterintuitive. If you were in that situation, you would want to bury your car completely with a foot and a half deep of snow and create your own igloo coming in and out of there with one of the doors, depending on the prevailing winds. This is the most massive snow. It's really record-breaking snow. Like Buffalo gets snow, but this is 4x over the record broken last time. Something has jumped off the rails, literally. There's a 4x increase in the amount of record snowfall twice already in 1 year in Buffalo. You would expect that anyway. You know, the Buffalo blizzard was in 1977 when they had to bring the National Guard in. Well, they got to bring the National Guard in again this time. So the news is not really forthcoming in Buffalo anymore. I wonder why. You know, it was there for a moment to say how, vast of a storm it was based on global warming, and now somehow it's just disappeared out of the news cycle. But what's not really making the news, remember, conspiracy theory before was HAARP would heat the atmosphere and bend weather patterns, and you guys are tinfoil hat wearing, fill in the descriptive adjective. Well, here we go. Scientists plan to hit an asteroid with 9 million radio waves from HAARP. An asteroid. That's not on our planet. So you have to think of the ability for low frequency radio waves to actually exit the ionosphere, which is it'll be an electrical interference pattern in itself, because that's where the boundary layer is of our magnetosphere, or the magnetic field around the planet. Now that low frequency radio wave needs to penetrate through a wave frequency itself and then reach out. Now you have to think, if the science is that good where they can actually use an auroral scope or array like this and reach an asteroid off our planet, what do you think they can do with bending weather systems? Or creating high pressure domes that last for months and months and months and create a drought in an area and then flood other areas? All it takes is electrical input. And you have to wonder, whether, portable nuclear reactors, that they're putting up there, because it would draw from the grid and you would know operationally how much, gigawatts are pulled out of the system to power this thing. What if you had substations of mobile nuclear or magnetic motors that are not talked about to power this thing, so you could run it in a blackout type of way where it wouldn't be shown on the grid on a pole, because you have your own electrical infrastructure to power that thing. So it would appear as if it's not really that operational, but when they come to do this program, they're going to really ramp the juice on this one. So how does this mix in with what we just saw with the coldest ever and the warmest ever weather patterns in Europe? And the food, again, we're coming back to the food, the whole thing about the food, trying to mask the food crop losses. And just keep in mind, they're trying to target an asteroid off planet, and they're telling you that they're not able to affect weather systems on our Earth by bending or heating areas of the sky to then cause perturbations or changes in the pressure to make clouds bend around that. If it vibrates faster, it's hotter, so the clouds will either run into that and go around it or get pulled in and broken apart. So you can't have both. Now the cat's out of the bag. You just can't really have both anymore. So do a mind experiment with me here for a second. The science is incredibly developed on HAARP, but the forecasting on the polar vortex is incredibly advanced as well. So on the left side, I want you to watch as this animation goes through and how that vortex splits into two, and it appears to be two legs, if you will, better for a crotch in the pants there. And you can clearly see that happens right over the Arctic and down toward northern Greenland. But at the same time, electrically in the southern hemisphere on the right, you'll see the same reaction. The southern hemisphere is in summer, so it shouldn't be bolting up into the potential of Kelvin temperatures at 400. So notice how that spins out and then brushes Australia in the same days that electrically connected to the northern hemisphere vortex that breaks in half. Now, use this as a mind experiment with me. If you knew this was in play, and this is a 360-hour forecast, so we are talking literally 12, 14 days out. If you were able to amplify this with HAARP, and you would know when it spun around the other side of the planet and when it reached the United States, Canada, it would have an incredibly amplified effect. What does that do, though? All right, you can amplify the storm to a certain point, and you can get some outcome out of it. Perhaps the storm would be a little stronger. You'd have a little bit more deeper dip into the Arctic, into the polar vortex. But this is what it looks like on the ellipse. Now, this is the most incredible, strange. What you're looking at here is like beyond bizarre and orders of magnitude different than what you would normally see. I stopped right there where you can see how the vortex had split into two and bent. Like those wind patterns around through the different columns there. If you were using HAARP, you could get those to spin into an incredible vortex speed, if you will. The velocity of wind could be changed to have a bullwhip effect coming off of that. Okay, and you go, yeah, I understand that. Maybe it could intensify the storm, but here's where it gets really interesting. At the same time we had that record cold, we had those three coronal holes, and pretty much exactly in the center where that really light bit is there from the magnetic fields on the sun, the Earth was directly in the center of that. And you say, well, okay, it's the sun. But see, 15 days prior, those coronal holes were on the backside, and we have satellites up there called Stereo A, or Stereo Ahead. It's actually behind the sun, looking toward the Earth. So you're looking at the back of the sun, and you know 15 days approximately what will evolve into the front of the sun. Now put all these sciences together now. We got the HAARP, we got the vortice forecasts and ability to bend weather patterns. And we also have incredibly advanced solar dynamics and solar forecasting. You would use the sun to amplify the effect you already put in play here terrestrially on the planet. Now, this could only be done if you knew these coronal holes would have that same effect, a triangulation of the Earth in the center there. If I was going to do this, I would look on the backside and I would say, all right, 15 days later, we're going to see this massive coronal hole. We know it's going to amplify and pull in directly on the Earth, and you're going to get all this magnetic activity, which would in itself create disturbed, out of sync, orders of magnitude different weather patterning anyway. With a coronal hole fixture like this, where it's triangulated and the Earth in the center. So I would just look on the backside of the sun, like the backside of the microphone, 15 days in advance. It all works on this. And you say, well, 15 days, we're going to get all these coronal holes in front, and we know we're going to get incredible magnetism and different kind of electrical effects on the planet's weather systems anyway. But just as it happened to be, how many millions of a chance is that they were able to see that this polar vortex was going to split? This is where it gets nefarious, because if you were, and I really am at the point where believing this, that they did look at the sun's possible perturbations and changes in coronal hole stream and solar wind density and speed, and said, you know, we can match this. If you hit that, what is now splitting vortex in the Arctic with HARP, and amplify it and get it to bullwhip, because 15 days around, it's going to sync up when that comes 15 days around, and those two are going to interconnect on the planet. And what did we get? Lo and behold, we got the coldest ever recorded temperatures that wiped out almost all crops in the southeast U.S. I feel so sad for the farmers here. You know, I live in a farming country, and all the winter wheat has to be replanted down here, almost all of it. You know, there were verdant green fields just weeks before this storm, but the problem was the winter wheat hadn't gone to dormancy yet here in southeast Tennessee. So it was no snow cover, there was nothing to protect the plants, and they just got wiped out. Our garden, nothing survived. Even the winter green and the spearmint, gone. Totally gone. Anything we had, I had a bunch of comfrey out there that had survived up to this point through a couple winters, gone, frozen. Everything's black. Nothing survived, even though we put row cover over some things. So look at the whip effect that occurred with that plunge. And then you ask yourself, what happened with the extreme record warm temperatures happening over Europe? Pretty much the same thing, but they're 5 points of looping positive, negative polarity in the sunspot fields, 5 of them making a circle with the Earth in the center again as we enter into this record warm in Europe. So again, you know, how many days out will this effect be, and how much can it be amplified? I'm not saying that you're using the sun as an amplifier, like you can control that. It's a natural force. You just saw that coronal hole would match up in 15 days, and you also saw a very strange anomaly in the jet stream, and like 1 in a million chance, and hit that thing with HARP and amplify it so those two meet, and you get this incredible. I think this is an established science now. I really believe using solar forecasting to amplify the effects on Earth using different technologies that we have, because we can only get it to a certain point terrestrially. I mean, you could hit HARP and run it as far as you could and hit up all the auroral, research projects from Norway, into Russia and all the way back out to Alaska, and you could fire all of them up at the same time. But it doesn't matter how intense that is, there's going to be some limitations to what we can do to bring it to the uber. We're going to be limited by our own tech and our own atmospheric, there's limits on what you can do with the atmosphere. There's other blocking patterns that won't allow you to push other systems in because they control, they're the lion's share of the sky. But if you knew the magnetic fields of the sun would also interloop and interplay with that, you would actually get this type of result. And I am absolutely unequivocally saying that this is what is the new norm on how to bend weather systems and do such shenanigans, I should say, to wipe out crop production. Now, I'm saying they were using it as a nefarious way to, everything revolves around the food right now. See, there has to be a million explanations why the food will not be forthcoming this year. And one of these would be, well, we just had that super freeze. We lost almost all the winter wheat in America because Kansas didn't have very much snow blanketing on the ground either. But what was the effect of this? There's a couple different records that were broken. Here in Cheyenne, Wyoming, it was the fastest temperature drop ever recorded in human history, ever on any continent and any place ever in human history, ever. 47 degrees in an hour. And it wasn't even an hour, it was more like 35 minutes. They've never seen anything drop this fast. Now, you can even see the ripples in the atmosphere on how this thing displaced and dropped. It was like a step out in the atmosphere. So you could see the effects from the sun coupling with the amplified effects from what had happened in the polar vortex splitting into that leg fashion. Wind gusts, wind speeds, record cold, and anywhere you see those blue lines, if you can see my cursor moving off there, anywhere you see the edge of these blue lines, that's nearly 100% total crop loss wherever this frontal edge boundary had pushed over. Because the amount of cold that accompanied that, plants can't handle that, you can't handle that. It was just such the amazing event. I went out during that evening as it passed through Tennessee just to experience it. But the end result was this. Having something spill out so far beyond the norm. Now, how many times will this chance of 3 coronal holes with the Earth in the center with a dividing polar vortex happen again? Maybe not even in our lifetime. Maybe it only happens once every 5 years, but now they've established that the science can use terrestrial mechanisms to sync up with solar mechanisms. And this is really scary because if you wanted to be nefarious with it and you start wiring down this science, every single storm is going to be a superstorm. So look how much Siberian temperatures down, central US, these temperatures were for the record books, but remember, it's all blamed on global warming. So somehow, if you look at this, you're supposed to believe that somehow warmth from the equator came up in Siberia and pushed all the cold air completely over the United States. Well, if that were the truth, then it should be incredibly hot and we should see warmth all the way into the central Arctic to displace that much cool air. But I just don't see that. Now, that's a great excuse. Global warming, pay your tax. Well, how much do I need to pay for you to move the jet stream back? That's my question. Like, how fast can you do it? And what are your, what are your metrics for success by doing that? And I know we're coming up to the break here, and the Southern Hemisphere is the wild card in crop production this year. We got the civil war beginning in Brazil, another major grain exporter. We got the Ukraine offline. They're only going to be planting maximum 30% of their full field space or arable land this year. That was the projections from the agricultural minister in Ukraine back in the middle of December before the new 2 sets of airstrikes that took out even more infrastructure, littered the fields with even more debris, shrapnel, unexploded ordnance, etc. Bomb craters in the fields. I'm sure there's a few more now. 30% is what they were looking at maximum. Belarus has seen they've just mobilized everybody from 18 to 60. And it looks like the war is going to really start to amplify over there, which means the grain corridors are absolutely going to shutter. And that is also the fertilizer corridor. And the deindustrialization of Europe with the natural gas now shut off, all chemical facilities have shuttered. So now we have a lack of fertilizer on the planet. We have the cooling temperatures, that blue that you see there. Those are the anomalies from the Southern Hemisphere eruption from Tonga that are now cooling the Southern Hemisphere more than 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, Kelvin temperatures, as I mentioned in a couple shows on Brighteon TV here prior, Kelvin temperature is just a measurement of 1 equals 1, whether it's Celsius, 1 degree minus is 1 degree minus, or Fahrenheit. Kelvin is just another temperature measurement of 1 equals 1. So it drops, it's equivalent to a Fahrenheit, but it's a little bit different. The range there of where the boiling point is or where the freezing point is in the hundreds, a little confusing. But if you're going to use temperature to measure temperature, that's where you're going to want to go. There's going to be a full onslaught, massive distraction campaign to explain away all the crop losses.